Hello everyone, and it's about time I got around to making this video. I'm sorry it's so late, but I've been really hard pressed for time ever since I've gotten better from my illness, and I've just not had time to sit down and talk. But here we are, we're now going to sit down and talk about all that lovely information we've gotten from the past couple of weeks. First thing on the agenda is going to be the vampire counts. The Ides of March has been and gone. We have basically gotten almost as much information on the vampire counts now as we do the other factions, which is just beautiful. Let's start off with talking about their full roster. There was only one unit I was surprised to see is not in the full roster for the vampire counts, and that is Blood Knights. But when you take into consideration that the knightly orders are not in it for Empire, it might make more of a sort of what faction you are sort of sense. Whereas yes, the Blood Knights are in the army book, but they're not really under sort of Manfred's control. They're not really a Manfred fluffy style unit. Though in the tabletop, yeah, you could take Manfred and a unit of Blood Knights, and yeah, they could be in the same army in the fluff. It's just not. It'd be a rare occurrence kind of thing. They come from two separate vampire count factions, so to speak. Sort of how with the Empire, the Knightly Orders, exact same thing going on there. You get Reichsguard when you're, because we're technically playing as Reichland, and if we play as the Empire. But will the other Knightly Orders be available to the other areas of the Empire? So for example, will a certain count get access to the Knightly Order that comes from his area? And though there's been lots of speculation on this and a lot of people disagreeing and saying they doubt it on the forums, it would be really sort of a nice thing to see. The other possibility for these units being left out I can see is a big Legendary Lord DLC. For example, we'll get... I'm not big on the Blood Knights fluff and lore, I haven't really read about them. So it's the one thing I don't know, so I don't really know who their leader is. I know they worked... they fought with Conrad quite a bit, Conrad von Karstein, back when he was the leader of the Vampire Counts, but it can't be him because he's dead and he was only ever a hero level character. So say for the Vampire Counts they get some big legendary lord for the Blood Knights and then they come with him. And for the Knightly Orders, say we get the Grand Marshal of that Knightly Order is a legendary lord, and then we get that Knightly Order with him. So it's sort of like a legendary lord plus a unit DLC bundle. That's the other thing I can think of, which would work well for the dwarves as well, because we could get an Anvil of Doom with, I can't remember his name, but there's this runesmith that is the most powerful runesmith for the dwarves, and he always is mounted on an Anvil of Doom. His name escapes me at the moment, and I'm not going to haul out the codex and make this video 5 minutes longer just to figure out his name. But yeah, I thought that was quite interesting. And as for roster wise, do I feel they need them? Not really. I feel that the role that the Blood Knights will perform can be easily performed better by some of the other units, like the Vargeist, the Terrorgeist, the units like that can do the sort of hammer sort of role of hammer and anvil, but better because they can fly. So yeah, I don't really feel that they're really needed. They're not you can't have them without it because the army would just fall apart. The role is very well covered in the Vampire Counts. As for their playstyle in the battle, that was perfection. Perfection. They are very, very hammer and anvil. They've got very, very large units of weak troops that are quite durable in the form of their zombies and their skeletons, which they use to tie down and hold the enemy in place, i.e. the anvil. Then they've got their lightning fast hammer units, such as the Terrorgeist and Crypt Horrors and their Black Knights and all that sort of lovely stuff. The magic as well for the Vampire Counts was, I'd say, both beautiful and face palming at the same time for me. Raise Dead, oh, beautiful. Being able to raise a unit of zombies, or if you double click, because we've seen it in the live stream, that's how you overcast. Let's talk about magic for a second here. If you just click the spell, you'll cast its basic level. If you double click, which we've only ever seen once in one of their live streams, it was the one with Craig and I can't remember the second guy, but Craig won the battle, the other guy tried twice and lost it. It was that quest battle for Manfred's sword, and we actually seen them use the overcast, which is what gives you a chance of miscasting. If you cast it as basic level, apparently there's no chance you'll miscast, but if you go for the bigger level spell, that's where you start taking a wee bit of a risk to get a bigger sort of spell off. And that is how you raise skeletons. You cast the bigger version of the spell. We don't know if that is possible to do for every spell so far, or if it's just some spells, but you double click to do it. And that was just beautiful. That worked to perfection. The limit of twice per battle, not per spellcaster, not per lord, seems to fit quite well. Because other than that, it might become very OP, especially in small scale battles. Could you imagine in small scale battle where it's basically a legendary lord, like 2-3 units against a legendary lord and 2-3 units, where if you could summon more than 2 units of skeletons to help you, oh my word, that'd be super cheesy. Whereas in a really large battle, like 2 20 stacks versus 2 20 stacks? 2 full stacks of 20 versus 2 full stacks of 20, summoning 2 more units of skeletons isn't going to drastically alter the outcome of the battle unless you use it at very key sort of moments. So that was what I seen that I really liked, and that was a big thing for the Vampire Counts. But the other thing to do with their spell casting, which I say is a wee bit of a facepalm, was the Invocation of Nehe. Now this spell in the tabletop is the central point of the Vampire Counts. It is the reason they'll never lose a war of attrition. It is the reason you'll never let them get into a war of attrition, because it doesn't matter how good your troops are, you're gonna lose. And it doesn't matter if you're like Skaven and you have a lot of them, you're gonna lose a war of attrition with the Vampire Counts because of this one spell. But in this, to be honest, it did next to nothing. We've seen it used several times, and for those of you that don't know, what it actually does is it's a healing spell. It would heal your unit and start raising fallen zombies, skeletons, whatever, from the unit. So you'd cast this spell, then you'd roll some dice. It's something like D6 plus your caster's level or something for zombies, and D3 plus this for that, and you basically bring a load of models back, heal a load of wounds and stuff like that, which is why you'll never win in a war of attrition, because they'll just keep coming back. Vampire Counts, you need to smash them away, gone. You can't let the battle drag out. But what did we see happen in the battles? Next to nothing. I never seen it raise a single soldier, though apparently according to CA it can. And all I seen it do was basically negate the damage the unit was taking for about 5 seconds. Negate the crumbling for a few seconds. But CA did say that they felt that the magic was a bit weak at this point, so they have given it a buff since. This was an earlier build, so fingers crossed that that spell has been buffed quite well. I don't care if it's an expensive spell, it was like essentially the cornerstone of like large Vampire Count armies with lots of zombies, skeletons, and stuff like that in the tabletop, but it was almost useless in the battles we've seen. Now, more onto the vampire counts. We did get to see a small glimpse at Ethereal units, and so far what I've seen, I'm not impressed, but I've not seen enough to make full judgment yet. We've seen them in one battle where they got destroyed by artillery, but CA said that they're planning to tone down artillery damage to them, because at the moment artillery doesn't get the debuff like melee troops do. Melee troops get a debuff hurting them, making it harder for them to hurt, making them really tanky, sort of like how they are in the tabletop. You need magic to hurt them. But artillery didn't have that debuff yet, so it just destroyed them. Then the other battle, we've seen them, a witch hunter accused and devastated them, so we've not really seen them come into their potential, do what they're supposed to do yet. But I did really like how they float and levitate. So terrain like marshes, swamps and all that sort of stuff does not affect them, which was really, really quite nice. Now, what else do we need to talk about for the vampire counts? Their corruption would probably be a really nice big thing to talk about. There was a rally point extra, which was basically nothing but a video on the vampire count corruption the other day, and it was just beautiful. My hopes have been realised. I've been saying from the beginning, ever since we've seen the corruption, instead of it just sort of jumping up and be going from like corrupted, well, going from no corruption to like little corruption to corrupted visually with not much change, there is a very slow sort of progression. So 10% corruption will look vastly different, well, not vastly different, it will look subtly different from 20% corruption, which will look subtly different from 30% corruption. It just sort of scales up and up and up rather slowly, which is what I was crying out for. I hate it when it's just you enter and blam, all of a sudden it's quite different. And that was really nice and beautiful, and I'm anticipating the same for Chaos Corruption. I'm actually quite interested to see if the two will sort of combine, and if they are mutually exclusive. So can you have 60% Vampire Corruption and still have 80% Chaos Corruption, or does it cap out at 100 Corruption, so you could say have 50 of each, or 40 and 60? And if visually how that works, can you even have the two in the same place? I'm pretty sure we've had screenshots where we've seen the two in the same place. Now, but what does this corruption actually do? To me, it looks a lot like religion or culture from older Total Wars on steroids. So obviously it doesn't just change the map. It has a chance of spawning vampire count armies if it's really high, and I'm assuming the same for Chaos. Your vampire counts will actually take attrition if they're in an area with low corruption, and you can get it in a few ways. You can send agents in to try and spread your corruption, or you can try and build buildings which send influence into the neighbouring areas. Or there was this one other thing that I thought was like really, really sweet. We've never seen anything like it in Total Wars before. You can ally with that sort of Empire faction and sort of eat it from within. You can then, once you're allied with an Empire faction, you can actually build some corruption buildings sort of in the underground, sort of on the low key, not actually underground, but you know what I mean, sort of hidden from plain view in this sewers type thing, hidden and unseen by the ally until it is too late and bam, you've taken them over from within, not even having to lift a sword, which really suits the vampire counts. It was really nice. I loved seeing that. I was like, wow, when I seen that, because it's really not something I was expecting. It's just We've never seen anything like it in Total War before. The closest thing we've really had is like the Eco-Icky sending monks and going, can I convert the populace? Ah, I failed this turn. Can I convert the populace? Ah, I failed this turn. Can I convert the populace? Ah, I've got them. New city. There we go. But this seemed much more of a better sort of way of going about it. Now, Vampire Count heroes. They actually have 4, which I was pleasantly surprised to see, because I was expecting the Banshee to get left out with no love, or being made just sort of like the squad leader for a unit of Cairn Wraiths or something like that. But it is actually a hero class. So the Banshee, I'm almost sure, is going to be our sort of scout, and on the battlefield though, it might be of a more of a tanky role, considering it is an ethereal hero. That'll be really interesting to see once we see more on the Banshee. Then obviously they have their White King, which is their basically hero Graveguard unit, which was like a king of the olden days, which has been resurrected as a white, hence White King. And he's just really a really powerful melee sort of hero. Great at leading units of Graveguard, that type of thing. Just fighting his way, chewing his way through infantry. Basic melee hero. And then we've got the Vampire, which is a bit like a combination of the White King and the Necromancer, which we'll talk about in a second. And depending on which way you spec him up, there'll be which way he does it. I also see him being the guy you want to spread corruption into neighbouring lands, where the White King being more sort of train the troops, the type hero from the past Total Wars. The champion type hero from past Total Wars. Then obviously we've got the Necromancer, which is obviously our pure mage type hero, which I see having more sort of like the politician type role from older Total Wars. Now, what else? Because there's quite a lot to talk about for the Vampire Counts. The Vampire Counts don't get gold. They get these 2... I can't remember what they're called at the moment, but the symbols are like wee skulls. And it's like soul power in bodies or something like that. And you need so much soul power and so many bodies to actually reanimate. And it's 2 currencies sort of like that. And one is used as upkeep and one is used when you're recruiting troops. And that was really quite nice. And it just gives them that wee bit more variety. And it was also talking about something that was really nice. You can, instead of building barracks, you build like graveyards, which is another way to generate these sort of souls and bodies type thing. But it did mention that it would be very, very good for you to defeat a Dwarven Karak or an Orc held Karak. Then you can turn it into a huge massed graveyard. We haven't really seen much of this. If it works like raising, except you just get a huge boon of souls or whatever it is, or if it technically counts as yours, we don't know, and it's just a really big graveyard that gives you a lot of income. But if you remember all the way back to Al Bickham's campaign, when they were talking about the regional conquest, it must have been about November, December last year. He often talked about invading the dwarf lands, and he didn't seem to own them. And he was like, oh, I was getting most of my income from raiding dwarven lands, so we just assumed it was gold, he was just plundering. But he didn't seem to own them, so I would assume it is just like a raise option, where you create a mass graveyard, and you just get this one-off huge bonus of resources for your vampire counts. Now, I'm sure there was something else I need to talk about to do with the vampire counts. There was so much to talk about them. Just trying to rack my brains for what it was. Ah well, it's not coming to me for now, so we'll move on to the sieges, and if we need to come back by the end, if I remember, we will do. Sieges. I must admit, I was a wee bit disappointed here, and this is one area I'm hoping they improve post-game release. The maps seem to be pretty much a reskin of each other. Yeah, the backgrounds are beautiful. They must have spent ages working on them, but the actual bit you fight on, we've seen an Empire one, we've seen a Vampire Count one, and we have seen a Dwarven one. And the only major difference with the Dwarven one was it was underground. And we've seen level 1 cities and we've seen level 4s. The only difference was the towers. And so I was just... I was a wee bit disappointed with that. The cities were just way too similar for me. There is one thing that gives me a wee bit hope for having a wee bit of variety and actually having something that's quite nice, is in earlier videos we did actually see... I think it was the Grimgore Ironhide cinematic trailer. We did see there was a second wall for sorry about that, for Altdorf. It had a second wall, and the fact that the defensive building chain you can actually build in at least your smaller settlements to turn them into wall settlements is probably valuable for, well, available for your main settlement as well, which I'm hoping will give it a second wall, which will make the siege seem a wee bit grander, have to break through 2 layers of walls. I'm just wondering how they're going to balance that though, considering you're not going to be able to carry your siege towers over the first wall, so unless the outer wall is a wee bit thinner, a wee bit weaker, and it's easier to break holes in, large enough for your siege towers to go through, I don't really see it being very well easily balanced, so it might have been removed for the simple fact that you can't really get siege towers through, making it one hell of a lot harder to get through the main wall, unless the main wall is on the outside and it's just a sort of small, easily climbed, scaled sort of wall on the inside. But I'll be interested to see if that is still a thing, and my fingers are so dearly crossed. But I'm hoping we get more post-release, or hopefully there is some... Well, I was going to say, hopefully there's some very unique cities, but then the Empire one we've seen was Altdorf, and it was the same as the Dwarven ones, so there isn't really much hope for that. And I'm pretty sure the Dwarven one we've seen was Zufbar, and the Vampire Count one was Tempelhof, if I remember it serves, and they were all exactly the same, just a reskin basically, with a different backdrop and different walls and buildings. And so I was a wee bit, aww. But most of the changes, gameplay wise, I do really quite like. But there was one other thing that really sort of just to me. Let me just explain a wee bit about me as a gamer before I say anything. Gaming for me is all about immersion. I don't care if it's really hard or really easy, as long as something unrealistic and stupid doesn't happen. And so when I see zombies just walking up to a wall, then all of a sudden just going, boing, I got a ladder, out of nowhere, it's just sort of a wee bit, it just forces me to realise I'm playing a game, I'm not actually in the world again. I'm like, you know what I mean? Because it's, for me, it's all about that immersion. You escape from reality, you're in this other reality, and you're doing this, you're doing that. That's what gaming is all about for me. That's where I get my enjoyment. I'm not huge on challenge, I'm not huge on competitive gameplay. I'm just all about escaping reality into this larger than life type place. So when something like magic ladders just spawn in, it just destroys that for me for the seconds that it's happening until I get back into it. So that's why that was a wee bit disappointing for me. To be honest, it'd be a lot better for me if they just climbed like in Shogun. I know that doesn't suit the fluff, and I'd probably have moaned about that a wee bit, but it would have been preferable to them just going, I've got magic ladders. So yeah, I was a wee bit disappointed there. Like, I wouldn't mind if every unit just got a free ladder at the beginning of the campaign, at the beginning of the level. It didn't restrict their movement or anything. You just seen them like carrying the ladders as they went to the wall. Like, I would not mind that. I would not mind that at all. It's Total War here. We've never actually seen much interaction between the siege equipment and the actual people, like the towers and all that would just move forward with the unit following it. But just magic ladders just spawning, they were just But yeah, I've talked way too much about magic ladders. On to the rest of the siege. The actual, forgetting that the sieges are clones, I do feel they look quite impressive. You've got about a third of the map is just the castle, the wall. The towers at level 1 don't look that strong, but at level 4 they look pretty damn powerful. The walls being larger makes the fighting on the walls much more tactical from what I've seen of the few gameplays we've seen. And dwarves, don't get me wrong when I say everything just seems to be like a copy-paste reskin. The dwarves are still very strong on the defensive because they've got some very good defensive troops they can stick on top of the walls. Even their basic range troops are not too shabby at keeping themselves safe in close combat. So they're very strong sitting on top of those walls, and then in their artillery and those towers just destroy and obliterate their opponent. So dwarves are very strong on the defence, and sieges do look great. It's just the reskin and my loss of immersion from me that destroys it. I don't really have much more to say because I want to try them out myself before I decry them as better or worse than older Total War sieges. From what I've seen, they look better. Think more Shogun. It looks like it's going to be more like Shogun style sieges with you being able to scale the walls with the magic ladders, but you still want to use siege equipment, because when you scale the walls with the magic ladders, you're getting a huge debuff in tiredness and all. You're not being very well protected from missile or ranged attacks. So you definitely want stuff like siege towers, and you're definitely wanting to do stuff like batter down the gate to let your cav in, and you're definitely wanting your monsters to be flying over, harassing, and all stuff like that. So it does look very in-depth. It doesn't look like it's going to be just a mass charge scale up the wall. You're definitely going to want to bring your stuff like your siege towers to keep your troops safer, fresher. And so I do think the sieges are going to be very good. I don't think it's just going to be like the Rome 2, just a mass flame torch the gate and then everyone goes in, but instead magic ladders. But I really want to reserve that final right for when I play it myself, because as I said, I've only seen, I think it's about 4 or 5 siege battles we've seen from a combination of CA and other YouTubers that have been allowed to get their hands on it so far. So there we go, that's been quite a long video. I'm pretty sure I've missed quite a few things out because there has been quite a lot. I'm going to try and remember what those are, and we'll maybe make another video about them at some point. But really getting another information video up where we covered the majority of it, the most juicy things, was what I was wanting to do really now. And I'm actually going to be making another video really soon, hopefully as soon as my new camera comes through the door. But if it doesn't come through the door soon, I might just need to take a photo instead. And that video is going to be all about EGX Resed and how I'm going to be there, and it looks like CE are willing to allow me to ask them a few questions whilst we're there. So fingers crossed, looks like we might be getting something good there, but at the very least I'll be recording my experience to pass on to those that were not able to go. And I'm really hoping that I'll get hands on the game to a good level, because they've not announced what is at EGX Resed yet. Okay, I'm going to save talking about it for the actual video about it, because this is not what this video is about. Just a wee teaser then, for now. Hope yous have all enjoyed this. I'll see yous all next time. Yous guys are awesome. Thanks for your patience in waiting this. And if there is anything yous want me to talk about that yous know I've missed, feel free to leave it in the comments section, because I'm sure I've missed something. I know there was something else I was wanting to talk about the vampire counts with, but I cannot put my finger on it. So yeah, see you all next time. Bye.